Have you ever attended a wedding where the bride or groom was left at the altar? How did it turn out? This actually happened to me. The guy I was supposed to marry just didn't show up at all. He called all of his friends and family on his side and told them not to bother showing up because he wouldn't be there. We waited around until about an hour after the wedding started and finally got a text message saying he wasn't coming. I got to look like a jerk by telling my family, "Oh, sorry, there won't be a wedding today." It was mortifying. And to top things off, my son was asking me why his daddy didn't want to marry mommy. That was very hard to explain to a 2-year-old. I was dating this girl for 5 years. I popped the question, and she happily agreed. 10 months in, and the day had come. Someone walked in to watch the wedding, and her entire demeanor instantly changed. When the priest asks her the question, she loudly said no, and she walked away with that guy. As it turns out, she was cheating on me with some dude for almost a year. Apparently, he knew about our wedding and walked in to scoop her out. I was left with severe anger. I screamed at her family and mine to get out of the church and let me be. I was extremely pissed. Soon after, the sadness came in. I got over her surprisingly quick. It took me 4 months, which was good because I found out the guy was using her hard-earned savings for his meth addiction. The last time I heard from her, she is living in a homeless shelter. I'm happily married to someone else now and have kids. My cousin was supposed to get married in a Mormon temple to his fiance that he had converted. They were arguing the months leading up to the wedding because the bride wanted to have a regular wedding ceremony and get sealed in the temple in between the ceremony and the reception. Her family isn't Mormon and can't enter the temple, but since the church has removed the policy stating that U.S. members have to wait a year to be sealed if the couple has a normal wedding, she figured this wouldn't be a problem. My cousin is an ass and likes to show off how much holier he is than everyone else, so he said it was a deal breaker because he didn't want a regular ceremony to take away from the sacredness of the sealing. The bride is obviously sad. The joy of getting married is overshadowed by the fact that her dad can't walk her down the aisle. The day of the wedding comes. She is hugging her dad and mom, trying to keep it together, and she goes inside the temple, 30 minutes into it, and the bride comes running out the front doors wearing the ridiculous temple clothes and tells her parents she didn't want to get married. My cousin came out later in his regular wedding tux and was angry. They tried working it out, but she said she never wanted to go to the temple again. I don't blame her at all. That place is bizarro. And that she didn't actually believe in the religion, but she loved him, so she tried. She said she wouldn't be able to forgive herself if she left her entire family for a ceremony that was really creepy for her. I was at the wedding for one of my sister's friends. The bride never showed up at the wedding and no one could find her. After several hours, the groom and his family all went home. Turned out the bride went for a wild night of partying and slept with some guy she met at a club. She was passed out drunk at his place all day long before she came around and realized she missed her own wedding. She was out with a friend that did nothing to stop her from getting wasted and screwing around. I think her friend let her get carried away because she thought the bride wouldn't have been a good wife and figured it was the easiest way to get the couple to split up. The father of the bride was mad as hell about the expense of the wedding, which came out of his pocket. The groom has since moved on with his own life. Discovering the woman he was going to marry had cheated on him the night before their wedding made him break it off. He hasn't gotten married, but I hear he's dating someone, and it looks serious enough they may get married soon. The bride has been having problems trying to get the respect of her family back after that stunt. She once tried to talk to me when I was single to see if we could go out. I told her flat out I had no interest in dating a woman who cheats like she does. Please like and subscribe for more videos like this. Thank you. A buddy of ours was going to marry this girl he had known for a few years. He was expressing doubt, but racked it up to being nervous about marriage. The night before the wedding, he broke down crying and thought he was making a mistake. We offered support and told him it would be okay. We said that if he didn't want to do it, he didn't have to, but we encouraged him to go through with it. The day of the wedding comes. He is at the altar, waiting. I don't know about other religions, but Mexican Catholic weddings have this moment before the bride comes out where it's quiet with anticipation and everyone is just waiting. My buddy is sweating like a madman. My other friends and I notice and think he is about to pass out. Then it happens. The groom starts rocking back and forth. He looks like he is about to faint, and he slowly starts side shuffling. My buddies look at each other and just know what is about to happen. The groom turns to his right and starts heading to the side door. Some people in the church notice and there is a gasp. He beelines to the door and goes outside. Me and my buddies follow him. I just thought he needed air. Nope. He heads straight toward the sports car he had rented. He yells at us to get in, and we do. He turns the car on and starts making his way out of the parking lot as the people in the church start to come out and yell. Then he takes off. We are screaming in the car, and he has this dead serious look on his face. We end up in Vegas for the next few days. His phone is blowing up, but he never answers it. The dude ends up joining the military and leaves for boot camp just 2 weeks after all of that happened. He stayed with us couch surfing for 2 weeks and disappeared from his bride, her family, and even his. Last I heard of him, he had served multiple tours overseas and was part of a recon unit. Haven't heard anything else from him for a few years now. None of us have, actually. The bride was devastated, of course, but she later got married, for real this time, and is very happy in her new relationship. My entire 4th grade class was in attendance at our teacher's wedding when she was left at the altar. The whole situation was ugly. My teacher was the bride and was halfway down the aisle when the groom decided he couldn't do it. He walked off to the side. At first, my teacher and her father didn't notice and kept walking, smiling radiantly. There was about a minute of solid confusion, last-minute cold feet, bathroom emergency, before everyone realized what was going on. My teacher was whisked out of the church, and an announcement was made that there was not going to be a wedding. This happened the 2nd or 3rd week of June. She didn't come back for the last week of school. This happened sometime in the 70s. My uncle in India was attending the wedding of some not-so-close friends. It's totally common to have 1,000 people at an Indian wedding, with most guests barely knowing the couple. The bride was left at the altar. She was literally standing on the stage and waiting alone while everyone was watching her. So my uncle stepped up and said he'd marry her. He must have felt some sudden rush of Bollywood go through him. Anyway, she said yes, and they are happily married to this day. This happened when I was 14. I didn't learn about the full extent of the events that happened until a few years later when I was older and had a better understanding of things. My brother was one of the groomsmen at a friend's wedding. It was a typical college sweetheart story. The bride and groom had dated all through college, and he had proposed on their graduation day. Everything was all set for a beautiful summer wedding. However, the bride was having doubts. She had only ever had sex with one man, her fiance, and knew that the groom was in the same situation. Apparently, she had been reading a lot of marriage self-help books, and she had come to the conclusion that lack of sexual experience was the #1 destroyer of marriages. She came to my brother's friend, the groom, with this idea that they participate in a foursome or a partner swap with the best man and maid of honor, their 2 best friends, the night before the wedding. I swear you can't make this shit up. The groom fights the idea for a while, but his fiancée threatens to call off the wedding if he doesn't go with it. He talks to his best friend, who reluctantly agrees. She talks to her best friend. She also reluctantly agrees. So the night before the wedding, the 4 are getting plastered at the happy couple-to-be's apartment. Here's where shit goes down. Apparently, the groom drinks too much and can't get it up. At least that's what he says happened. And what essentially occurs that night is a threesome between the maid of honor, the bride-to-be, and the best man. The groom, humiliated and distraught, leaves the apartment in the middle of the trio's lovemaking and drunk drives his car straight into a freeway median. The wedding is called off due to the accident, and the groom ends up paralyzed from the waist down. The paralyzed former groom doesn't like to talk about anything that happened, and I'm pretty sure he and his former best man don't talk anymore. I attended a wedding where the groom, when asked to say "I do," passed out straight away, falling down a small flight of stairs. After coming to a few seconds later, he got a look of panic in his eyes and ran out of the building. 5 minutes go by. Someone goes out after him. Then 10. Then 20. Several people have left to see what's going on. Now people are wondering if he'll come back at all. He re-enters the church with only his mostly open tuxedo jacket on and a bare, hairy chest showing. He looks pale as a ghost. He apologizes for being too hot. It was the middle of winter. He slowly walks up to the altar, bare chest showing, and the ceremony resumes. Chest hair and all. They actually did get married that way. That was the weirdest wedding I've ever witnessed. I attended a wedding where the bride was left at the altar. Man, it was sad and odd. There was a pretty large audience. Soon enough, the time to start comes and goes. Everyone in the audience is sitting there waiting at least 30 to 60 minutes after the ceremony was supposed to begin. No official word from the wedding party as to why there was such a long delay. Rumors started going around. People were saying that one of the groomsmen stained his shirt, and a bunch of other stuff that indicated nothing serious. Finally, the bride's father, with tears in his eyes, gets up on the stage to announce that the groom has had a change of heart. Needless to say, the guests were pretty shocked. Then the bride's father told everyone to go on ahead to the reception and eat, because the food had already been paid for, so we might as well enjoy it. I couldn't believe it. The bride actually showed up at the reception and greeted everyone, with a smile no less. The groom did not make an appearance. The bride got married a few years later, to a guy with the same first name, oddly, but the groom is still single to this day. Apparently, he was never truly ready to get married, but he couldn't bring himself to say anything until the pressure finally got to him on the big day. He got a lot of flack from friends and family naturally, but the two of them ended up agreeing that since he wasn't ready, it was a good thing that he did not commit, though he definitely regrets the way he led her on. The strangest part of the whole day, the wedding was on April 1st. I was a bridesmaid at a canceled wedding. All of the bride's friends, myself included, her parents and anyone else with half a brain, had been telling her to get rid of him all along and to definitely not marry him. He has no job and is physically and verbally abusive. We'd given up by the time of her wedding, and we were just trying to be happy for her. Instead of saying, "I do," she just looked around the room and then ran back down the aisle. We were all dumbfounded, except for her father, who yelled what we were all thinking, "Thank you, Jesus!" My own wedding got called off mid-ceremony. I had just finished saying my own vows before being arrested by local police on an assault/domestic violence charge. I beat up my almost brother-in-law for stealing my car. He punched me in the face first, but that doesn't matter in my state. Police didn't care what was going on, and I got carried out in handcuffs in front of all of my family. There are many negative consequences to having your wedding day ending like that beyond the obvious, and I have never been able to repair my relationship with her family. I left my first wedding as my fiance was walking down the aisle. It was like a moment of clarity where time just stood still. I realized that not only did I not love her, but I didn't even really like her. Our whole relationship had been one of those natural progression deals where we never really evaluated things. We just moved along on some sort of schedule. So the music's playing, she's walking towards me, and I'm getting this flash of the impending misery that would be my life if I went through with this. I looked over at my best man, who has been my best friend since I was 4, and with panic in my eyes, I said, "Dude." He got a quizzical look, and he asked me, "Are you sure?" And I nodded. Then he turned to the rest of the groomsmen, who were all friends of ours, and said, "We gotta go." Now I'm sure you've seen in the movies where someone takes a shot at the president, and the Secret Service grabs him and rushes him out of the building and into a waiting limo that speeds off. Well, apart from the gunfire, I know what that feels like. After I left, I went straight back to my apartment, and we grabbed everything we could fit in the limo. I slid the key under the door and left. I never saw or spoke to my fiancée again, although I did find out from a friend that she ended up getting married a few years later. One of my friend's sisters did this. It happened a few years back. It was an arranged Indian marriage, and the bride was initially very accepting and happy with the groom. They talked and fell in love with each other, leading to the marriage. The bride was very much involved in all the planning and preparation, and was really looking forward to the wedding. About 1 month before the wedding, the bride met her high school crush and started to bond with him. Then she fell in love with him. She eloped with the guy just hours before the wedding. Her parents disowned her. She heard a lot of people doing that. I was a guest on the bride's side. She was a former coworker that was kind enough to invite me. She started walking down the aisle but then stopped halfway. Her father and mother came over. She whispered to them, then they all turned around and walked away. The groom immediately followed. The music kept playing, then slowly drifted away. A couple of minutes later, the father of the bride came back down the aisle and apologized, but there was going to be no wedding today. There were a couple of angry family members on the groom's side, but once they talked to the father of the bride, they immediately just left. At the door, the mother of the bride thanked us for coming and told us that they would explain everything later, but for now, we should just head home. The story is that the night before the ceremony, the groom confessed to the bride that he is gay, but he loved her. He still wanted to marry her and raise children, but he needed her to know. She couldn't let him live like that, and it wasn't fair to either of them. I was a bridesmaid at a wedding. The bride's biological mother showed up uninvited 45 minutes before the ceremony. They got into a screaming match, ending with the bride slapping her bio mom. Bio mom had the bride arrested. The wedding ceremony didn't go on, but the reception did. When bio mom tried to crash that, cops were already in place to arrest her for trespassing. Charges against the bride were dropped shortly after. The bride and groom had a civil ceremony at the courthouse a couple weeks later, with just their immediate families present. I found out later on that the bride, who is very well off in her life despite her train wreck of a mother, secured a great civil attorney and successfully sued the woman for the embarrassment and the cost of the wedding reception. Bio mom had to sell her own house to cover the cost of the judgment and later filed for bankruptcy. The insult to injury was finding out the bride would have let the whole thing go if bio mom agreed to go to rehab and therapy, but she refused. A wealthy cousin's would-be husband disappeared the day before the wedding. No explanation given. He just left with a friend. Both their families were all in town for the wedding already, so they skipped the ceremony and still had the reception. It was a huge party and the most fun non-wedding I've ever been to. There was a screw-it attitude under the circumstances, so all the kids, I was 14 at the time, were allowed to drink and the band played whatever they wanted. It was a blast, and as far as I could tell, the ditched bride had a great time. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to my channel for more Reddit stories. See you in the next video.